Hello and welcome.
Good morning.
Good afternoon. Good evening. This is my third episode of the Who Says That podcast. And today I have a very special guest. Can you believe I'm talking like this? It's like a dream to be able to talk into a microphone and do shtick. Like I know what I'm doing.
You honor me. You honor me.
Well, thank you, Rich, because everybody's fascinated to know about you. I'm telling you, when I told people I was interviewing you, they couldn't believe it.
Really?
It was
My nieces?
like two people. Jada, my daughter,
Right.
and your sister, my wife.
Yeah. Wow.
She's like, really?
It reminds me of Flight of the Conchords when they were like, the fan comes to all the shows.
Yeah, I don't get the reference, but I know it's funny and important.
Right.
Anyway, so I started this podcast with your sister, my wife, Candace.
Right.
And it's turned into something, I think.
It's a family operation.
It's a family operation, and you have been actually encouraging to me to do stuff like this, which is ridiculous, but thank you.
Listen, whatever gets us out of the house these days
Right.
is important.
Getting into talking to a microphone is
Right.
it's kind of fun.
I like these mics. They're fancy.
Right? Get real close. We don't want to miss a word of what you have to say.
Right here?
How we doing there, Colton? Sounds good? So anyway, I'm here with Richard Levy, who is my brother-in-law, who is one of the most impressive entrepreneurs I've ever met. Look, don't make a face. He's got a fascinating history that I would love to hear his story, because I think all the three people who hear this are going to want to know about you. One will be your mother. Mm-hmm. Maybe your father will listen. I don't think he has the patience for it. And Candace is definitely not going to listen.
Yes.
So.
Exactly. Well, full disclosure, this is an hour of your life you'll probably never get back. But
That's right.
Here goes nothing.
Can you imagine spending an hour of time with me? And
Right.
you'd be like, oh, what a waste. No, it's not true.
No, I mean for the studio audience at home.
There's three people listening, so there's no pressure.
Okay. Here we go.
You just have to be your charming self.
Always. Always.
Always and always. So Rich, if you don't know, Rich started a salad store back in, when was that?
February 2000.
It's called Salad Spinners.
Yes.
It's like in lore of Chicago lunch eateries in the Loop. People love it.
It's a bit of a stretch, but okay.
It's not. Don't sell yourself short. People love that place.
Yes.
But prior to that, you were a student. You went to Indiana University. And I want you to tell the whole story. This isn't about me. Nobody cares about me.
Right.
I'm not sure if they care about you necessarily either, but you can tell your story because it is interesting, and I think people would want to know. Maybe we'll find out how you ended up at Salad Spinners. But before that, how you were like the living coming to America, right? The Jewish white coming to America.
That's true. I was just recounting the story of our arrival in the States the other night. I was at a wedding tasting, and I told the people there that we arrived in January of 2000. It was the day before Martin Luther King's Monday.
So you back up for a second, because you're getting ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
You emigrated from South Africa.
South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa.
That's right. In the mid 80s.
1988.
In the height of apartheid.
The height of apartheid, yes.
Your brave parents decided to move out of luxury and opulence of South Africa to beautiful Highland Park, Illinois.
Sure.
And you must have feel like we've arrived, like the promised land.
Tropical Highland Park, Illinois.
In the middle of January.
Yes.
And how old were you?
I was 13. I just had my bar mitzvah. And we arrived in the middle of a blizzard. We'd never seen snow before.
Can you imagine?
Which was exciting. We'd been to the States 6 months before in the summer, and we saw the house, we bought the house. But then we arrived in the middle of a blizzard, and we didn't even have like coats. So we had these like cheap sort of Woolworths type coats, and what we call tackies, which were gym shoes with holes in them. It's hard to explain.
Like sandals.
Probably about as robust as a pair of Keds.
Huh.
And we saw the snow. We were in the taxi on the way to the house. We're all excited. And as we get to the house, we are ready to just chomping at the bit to jump out and make a snowman. We never made a snowman or threw a snowball at each other, my brothers and I.
Right. When he says we, Rich has
Right.
two older brothers and a younger sister. Rich is my favorite. And then comes Candace. No, it's not true. No, they're all equally
Give
impressive.
you that $20 later.
Yeah. But I want to understand, as a 13-year-old kid, to move to a new country, that must have been either traumatizing or incredibly exciting and like an adventure?
You know, it was. It was. I recall that I kind of wanted to stay in Africa, but
Why? Why?
because my friends were there, my family, extended family was there. I was going to high school at the time, and I was excited about that. But I also wanted to come to the States. You know, we'd seen a lot of different strokes and silver spoons, a lot of sitcoms, and Magnum PI. So we were all excited for this adventure, and
And how wrong it was, right? It wasn't even close to Magnum PI.
it was a lot like silver spoons, though. The school part. I mean, I remember like the most exciting part was that you didn't have to wear uniforms.
You had to wear a uniform in South
You had
Africa.
to wear a uniform in South Africa, and I was excited to not have to wear a school uniform.
But you went to like a Jewish day school, right?
Right. Still have to wear a uniform,
Even in the public schools in Johannesburg?
especially at the public schools. The public schools were very Anglo. They followed the British tradition of, you had to wear
Sounds-
uniforms, blazers. If your shoes weren't polished, you
Then
got
what
in trouble.
happens?
You got jacked.
You get jacked?
Jacked. 6 of the best. A cane.
Jesus, I would
Back
have
in
been
the
I would
day.
have been out of there so fast.
Well, you didn't have a choice, and your parents encouraged it.
Really?
Back in the day. Yes. Our parents encouraged what they called
Corporal punishment?
Yes.
You never were corporal punished. Oh, you're probably
Once
a good boy.
briefly with a cricket bat.
Deserve it.
I think so. I think it was because I didn't have my PE kit. So my coach was like, bend over, Levy. It was kind of a rite of passage more than anything.
But that is interesting to be
Hard to
because I think of when I'm 13 years old, like
Mm-hmm.
to be able to like get up and leave a country to go somewhere else. I mean, that seems very like impossible to me. I would never have been able to handle that.
It's written in the Torah. Lech lecha mi'artzecha. Go from here.
But never mind that.
Yes.
So you came here, 13 years old, you saw the snow, and you're like, geez, this is unbelievable. What the country?
What a country. We jumped out of the car without coats, without gloves, with these, cheap tennis shoes on. And we went and made snowmen and started having a snowball fight, which lasted all of about 2 minutes before we had the searing pain, not only in our fingers, but in our toes, because the snow had
So you
seeped in.
You never learned in South Africa that it's cold in the other parts of the world?
We were told it's cold, but we never experienced that pain of a numb finger that's about to get frostbite, which you'll know which anybody who's lived in the northern climates knows.
All right. Listen, this is the most fascinating conversation I've had with you in a long time. Unbelievable.
Well, there's more.
There's
more time.
I think we're needing more time here.
Come back anytime.
No.
Yes.
But in all seriousness,
Yeah.
I want to understand the how you acclimatize to
Right.
northern suburb culture. Being from South Africa. I mean, when I was growing up, I grew up in the North Shore.
Right.
I mean, I didn't know there were white Jewish people in South Africa. It was just not on my radar. So,
Right.
I mean, I assume everybody else didn't know about white people from South Africa either, unless they were special or had better education than me.
It was interesting because we arrived right at the era of 2 movies that came out that were popular at the time. One was Coming to America,
Okay.
which I can't tell you how many times I got called Prince Hakeem, and then the other one
That should have stuck from now on. Uncle Prince Hakeem.
and then the other one was Lethal Weapon 2, where the South Africans are the bad guys.
Yes.
So and my brothers and I had hockey hair, a la Mel Gibson. So we fit right in. We
did fit right in,
We
though.
looked like 3 young sort of Jewish-looking Mel Gibsons. At the
Can you
time.
imagine?
Yeah. So that day that we arrived, here's what I remember distinctly is so when we after the 2 minutes in the snowball fight, we go in the house, we get unpacked. I think it was later in the evening. We went to bed and because we were exhausted from the flight, and then we woke up at like 2-3 in the morning, and the snow had really fallen. But we saw across the street someone was shoveling snow on the driveway, and we thought, "Wow, another neighborhood kid." So at 3 in the morning, my brothers said, "We have snow shovels in the garage," so we decided to go
And help him.
Oh no, we started shoveling our driveway, hopelessly clueless of how to do it. Okay.
That's not that complicated.
You remember in Coming to America where he's using the mop in the
Yes,
mop
yes.
in the mop bucket? It was kind of like that. I was
Son,
going this way, Greg was going that way, Lawrence was going this way, and we didn't shovel anything.
You didn't get it
We
done.
moved all the snow probably into the middle. And
Let's
the
go,
guy,
son. If you want to keep working here, you got to stay off the drugs.
right. Exactly.
Right.
And then the guy across the street we found out was not a neighborhood kid, but it was a snow service that comes in the middle of the night, which we found out was a thing.
Wow.
So
How lucky. The lap of luxury that someone would shovel your driveway for you.
correct.
Very similar to life in South Africa.
But for the next month, because it didn't snow again, ours was the one house on the block that had a horribly plowed, shoveled driveway and footprints everywhere, all over the snow.
But like, how do you make friends as a 13-year-old kid in a new country? I mean, I just don't know. Like
Right.
thinking about when I was 13, how like clueless I was about the world and how life works. Even though I don't think I have it figured out now. But the idea of interacting with people on that level.
You know, oddly enough, so I'd never been to a school with a black person, or let alone never mind a school. I'd never been to a restaurant or a movie theater or.
But let's be honest, how many black people are there at Highland Park High School?
Oh well, there were quite a few. We weren't in the high school. We were in the junior high, and we were the Fort Sheridan had a feeder. Fort Sheridan and Highwood were part of our school district, which I believe they still are. So it was Northwood Junior High. And I remember day one of class, they found me a buddy to take me around. Like, you know, the school gets you, this is the new kid. And there was a lot of new kids at the school because there were a lot of Army brats there. So so one of the Army kids took me around. His name was Maurice. I don't forget his last name. A great kid. Showed me around, showed me what pizza day was. I think pizza was like $1. And I think I didn't bring any pizza money. He's like, here, I'll give you $1 you can pay me back tomorrow. And I was all excited to try this big piece of Il Forno's pizza, which I ended up working for during high school. But that was my first introduction to an integrated school, which was interesting. And things like lockers and carrying your books, like we'd seen on silver spoons.
Well, let's just jump back to that, because you used the word integrated school.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure no one, my age
Right.
would understand what the heck you're talking about,
Sure.
an integrated school. I mean, the idea that you came from a country where segregation was the law, and then to
Right.
come here and it's not. I mean, that must have been sort of a culture shock, or how did you react to that?
It's interesting. We were always cognizant of the fact that there was something not right about South African culture. You know, I was born in a whites-only hospital in the heart of apartheid South Africa. We had relationships with Africans, with our black nannies and our gardeners, and especially their kids, because of the law of the land at the time, they could only live in a white area if they were working at someone's house. And they would often bring their kids who would stay with us, and they would play soccer together. And those relationships were friendly, but you knew that you could never go to a movie with your nanny's kid, or you could never go to the beach, for example. We would go on holiday, and we would have our staff would bring their kids, and we could play in the backyard, but we could never go to the beach.
Be in public.
It was a very strange way to grow up, but it felt normal for us because it's all we knew.
But how did they teach that to you in school? They just said, you're white, so you go here, and everyone else goes somewhere else.
It's great. So one of the first words I remember learning to read, which was, as a 6-year-old, you read everything. You're like, Mommy, look, sign says stop. And I remember learning to read the word European, which is a hard word to read and a hard word to pronounce because of, English is a tough language. But the word was on the toilet at the park that I was playing at.
The word European.
Yeah, and it was on the toilet said Europeans only. And then the other toilet said non-Europeans. And then it said it in Afrikaans, which is like a Dutch dialect. And I had to ask my dad not only what that word meant and why we needed 2 toilets, why my nanny couldn't use the same toilet as I used.
But like in your house, did they use the same sort of quarters?
No, so we had the servants, every home in Johannesburg, even if you were middle class, had servants' quarters. So you had you had your main home and then kind of like in the basement or off in the backyard, there was another sort of mini home where your staff lived. And oftentimes they were part of the family. They lived on site. We had good relationships with them. They were our second moms. You know, they used to play with us in the afternoon, make sure we were fed and bathed.
How did your dad handle that question? Because I'm thinking if my kid asked me that, I'd be like,
You know, I remember him explaining it to me, and I'll probably butcher it, so I don't want to, you know,
don't worry,
misquote him. But he was something along the lines of, you know, we have to wash our. There's a different way that we wash our hands that they wash our hands, and it was a very. I could tell it was an uncomfortable conversation for him to have with me. You know, and so. You know, so we kind of just glossed over it. But that was pretty much our whole childhood. You know, we had our community and they had their community. It was very much a separate but equal society, South Africa.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
that went on. The modern
and
era.
we would live. We knew where, like, we lived in one suburb, and on the other side of the highway there was a huge township called Alexandra, and we would drive through it on the way to the airport. So you'd be. You know, on the way to vacation, you'd be all excited to go on holiday, and you would drive right through the township on the way to the airport because it was a shortcut, and it was pretty safe to go for a while. And then they started to be rioting and violence, and so we used to take a long way to the airport. But
so then, as part of the story of coming here, I mean, it was obviously, you know, business opportunity, whatever. We can get into that, but you know, maybe underneath that was your parents' idea, say, hey, we need to get the heck out of this country because things can go one of two ways.
Sure.
Right.
So there was military conscription, which means that when you were 18 years old, you had to go to the Army. So there's 3 boys in my family, as you know, and then my little sister, your wife. So my parents and everybody, all the men in my family had been to the Army, or my dad was in the Air Force. And, you know, it's a much longer conversation, but for South Africa was holding up the beacon of freedom, quote unquote, in Africa. It was really apartheid was a Cold War issue more than anything else in the world, and that's a whole separate other discussion.
Yeah, that's boring.
But we were keeping the communists at bay. This army with the
whites were.
The white government, the Afrikaner government the apartheid government was keeping the communists out of Africa, which was largely keeping the gold price stable and platinum and uranium. You want those nice, pretty nukes you got in America? You need a lot of the uranium that was in Southern Africa, which was propped up by the apartheid government. Anyway, long story short, we would have had to go to the Army. My folks.
I couldn't imagine your Lawrence in the Army. You maybe, and Greg could handle it, but Lawrence, they probably would have been. You know what?
Greg was in the Army.
You can.
Lawrence, I cannot see in the Army. All of us, you know. But anyway, the point is, we.
He would have been fine though. We're just.
Yeah, we would. There was mandatory military conscription. My folks didn't want us going to fight because there was actually a hot war in Angola at the time, and they didn't want us to fight. My dad found an opportunity to buy a business that happened to be in Schiller Park, Illinois, and he
the promised land.
Came home one day and said, "Boys, we're moving to America," and we said, "Disney World, Dad?" He said, "Not quite."
Better.
Yes, better. Have you heard of the Chicago Bears? And that was...
Had you?
We hadn't, no.
Michael Jordan? No, Michael Jordan wasn't.
We had not heard. I knew nothing of Chicago.
But,
nothing.
You know, because I think of that from my perspective, my growing up, that the idea of going to war, to fight in a war in Angola, it's like incredibly foreign to me. I just could not, I can't wrap my head around that. As a father now, thinking about my kids and what goes on in the world today, but that just is like... beyond.
I'll tell you a very interesting and strange story. So in 1983, we first came to the States to visit, and that trip we went. You know, it was our first overseas trip. I was like 9.5, 10 years old, and on the way back from New York to Johannesburg, you land at a little island called Ilha de Sal, which is part of the Cape Verde Islands off the west coast of Africa. And on the tarmac at 2 a.m, refueling, there were 2 aircraft. One was a South African Airways flight from New York to Johannesburg. The other was an Aeroflot.
What's that?
That is a Russian passenger aircraft flying troops from Cuba to Angola to fight against South Africa. And both planes or quietly on the tarmac. And again, I look out the window and I say to my dad, because I read everything, those are funny letters. If you look at this, it's written in the Russian alphabet. I said, what does that say? And my dad explained to me. That plane, on that plane are soldiers who are going to go fight your uncle in Angola.
Your poor dad had. How did you deal with these tough questions?
You know, it was a wonderfully complicated time, and you know, for the most part, look, South Africa was a democracy as long as your skin was white. So take that what you will. So you could speak up against. Yeah. You could speak up to a certain extent, but if you were a crazy communist, they would have put you in jail.
You probably would have done the same thing here.
Yeah, you could say certain things. You could write letters to the newspaper, but the government would watch you, you know? And so for the most part, there were some people that were rebel rousers, that were communists that got put in jail, or activists that got put in jail. But for the most part, everybody kind of was afraid and they kept in line. And you know, they were also patriots. Whether you love or hate your country, you're still a patriot. You want it to do well.
Right.
And you root for your country, and the other alternative was you know, a Soviet-style government like they had in Mozambique or Angola, you know. But this is much more complicated in high level. I'm not sure anybody's interested.
Nobody's interested.
Yes,
I can assure you that.
Okay.
Right? Tom's like glazed over there. You can't believe this.
Right.
Okay. But then, all right, so you come to America and you assimilate very nicely, and,
right.
you get into the culture and the Bears, the Chicago sports, all that. It comes very naturally to you.
Not to me, no. I couldn't dribble a basketball to save my life.
Well, come on. No, not playing.
It was a disaster. I could ride a bike.
Yeah, okay, fine, fair enough.
I could ride a bike. That was fun.
You go to homecoming your freshman year?
No, I did not go. I don't think so. I don't think I went to homecoming.
Not because
I couldn't crack a date. Let's be honest.
What's changed, right?
Not exactly. Story of my life.
We can get into that, but we don't have to get into that. So, but food has always been an important part of your life and your family's life, which is actually also very different from my upbringing, where food was like not so important, right?
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you look at my parents; they weigh like 30 pounds each. They're so tiny.
But they like good food, and your mom can make some seriously great stuff.
She can bake a coffee cake. I mean, come on.
She bakes some.
She doesn't
amazing
make
stuff.
a whole dinner, like a whole
not
spread.
Discount Debbie.
I don't.
She's a dark horse baker.
Fair enough, but like the way we ate food is very different,
right?
Or our relationship with food than not you know, I'm judging a little bit that ours was probably could have used a little advice from your family, right? But ultimately, you go off to college, go through the whole process.
You get very well nourished.
You're well nourished. Are you the skinniest of the Levy boys?
I wouldn't say that. No, but
they're all my size.
But my mom would always one of the things we couldn't believe is you could go to the grocery store and buy so much stuff. Like there was just everything and anything under the sun was available at the drop of a hat, and not only at Sunset, but you could go to.
Nobody knows what Sunset is.
What was Dominic's? Dominic's before Mariano's, you know. So it was
the grocery store. Hey, think about that. I mean, culturally, that's just a small, minutiae thing that people take for granted.
We had grocery stores in South Africa, but we didn't have
like mega
as many products as they have in the States. Which
it's overwhelming.
Which was really, it was awesome, you know, for lack of a better term.
So where'd you go to college?
Indiana,
Hoosier.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable. Fantastic school. Fantastic university.
I loved every moment of college. It was just the best 4 years of my life.
But if you'd stayed in South Africa with something like college, like in Indiana, like a Big Ten school, I mean, that didn't exist.
Not a chance. So by the time I got to college, so apartheid was ending, they stopped military conscription, and a lot of my peers who stayed there, they did a university program. They call it varsity. It's got nothing to do with being a varsity athlete, but
we can talk about.
But they live.
It's a very important part of who you are.
Yes, it is.
Can't you tell?
But they live at home, and they go and they do a 2-year or 3-year program, and
they call that like matric or something.
Matric is high school, senior year of high school.
Yeah, I don't even know all the lexicon you guys use.
Which is the toughest year of high school there.
Why?
because you're trying to get into university versus junior year and in the States being your toughest because once you're in, you're in, and
You're in.
you're kind of coasting senior year,
That's true.
which I liked.
Coasting.
I like coasting, yes.
Indiana University, I mean, the school hasn't been the same since you left, I'm sure. Right? Fraternity?
I'll tell you a story. When I got
That's
there,
why
I
we're here,
really
Rich. How do you think this is going? We want to hear your stories. And that's why I brought you in here.
I didn't know
So interesting.
shit about anything. And I went and I was like, heard about this Bobby Knight character. And I remember like I lived right by Assembly Hall, which is where the basketball team.
Bobby Knight was the coach.
Yes, Coach Knight.
Fair, okay.
The general.
Seemed like an asshole.
And I get there in the fall of 93. And a couple of buddies of mine are like, let's go see if Assembly Hall's open. So we open the door. We're dumb freshmen. We open the door. And I forget why. They were practicing. So one of my buddies who was like a Mr. Basketball candidate in Indiana, which is a big deal.
Like he was on the team or like a walk-on?
No, he was in high school. He was like top 10 players in Indiana. Okay.
Where is he now? I
don't know. But he said to me, let's go in, let's pop in. So we pop in and we snuck in and we open. I see the door to the stadium, so I open it and I look inside and the team's practicing there. And I walk in and my buddy says, get the fuck out of there. I said, well, what's the big deal? I'm a student here. This is the gym. He says, well, get out of there. Okay. So we leave. We end up going to our first game.
Yeah.
And me and him are sitting behind the.
Wait a minute. How far did you get into the stadium? Are you just like
I just
into the
walked in
vestibule,
and I saw the team practicing. I saw Coach Knight in the red sweater.
Yeah.
And then I leave.
Okay.
Okay. So he grabbed me. Like, I think he grabbed me by the lapels. Let's get out of here. But then, a few days later, we're at our first game and we're sitting there and we're sitting right where the Hoosiers come out. And I see Bobby Knight walk out the locker room. And there's the stadium's packed. Okay. And we're sitting maybe 10 rows up behind the basket. And he walks out. And the crowd, there's just a hush on the crowd. And I said, okay, this guy seems important.
Right.
This guy seems important. Game starts, everything's going well, and then some dude a couple rows next to us was holding up a sign that says, who needs Lindemann? Who needs Rudy? We got Lindemann, okay? And the movie Rudy had just come out.
Okay, fair enough.
And Bobby, I didn't even know what happened. Next thing I know, Coach Knight points to this guy and says, you get the fuck out of my stadium now. Get this guy.
You're kidding.
Out. In front of everybody.
What an asshole.
The crowd just went silent. They got the guy. They took his sign. They ejected him.
They ejected him.
Bobby and I said, okay, I get it. I should not have snuck into this man's practice. I wanted to stay a student in good standing at this university.
Right. Well, how did it work out for Bobby Knight in the end?
You know what? You can say what you will about the guy. Certain players loved him, but it was a great.
That defined your college. The next 4 years of college after that were
correct. You understood who he was, and then you would often see him, and he was actually very cordial. Like I remember seeing him once outside of a movie theater, and he was very friendly to the students. Were coming up to him and saying, "Hey, Coach Knight." When he was not
wasn't
working,
throwing any chairs at you or anything.
When he was not on the court, he was a great leader, a great mentor. But he was like anything else in life. He was a very tough competitor.
That's okay, fair enough.
And he was all business. He had his way of doing things, and for better, for worse, it worked for him. Now, will that work in today's culture?
Probably not.
No, I couldn't tell you.
No, it wouldn't. There's no way.
Right. Indiana hasn't won a championship since, so.
That's true.
Although I think they're ranked number 10 now, I saw.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. What kind of place is this, Tom?
Right.
All right. So, Rich, how do you think this is going? Because I think this is couldn't be more interesting. You seem very relaxed.
I am relaxed. Thank you. I had... protein shake this morning, so I'm feeling pretty. I had my coffee, pumpkin spiced.
Did you make the protein shake, or did you buy it somewhere?
Yes, no, I make my own protein shakes.
What do you put in it?
Yeah.
What do you put in that?
I got this. I forget the name of the brand, but it's like this fuel that I forget what it's called. It's like a.
Wait a minute. You buy something, you don't know what it is, and you just,
I don't know the name of the brand.
Who told you to buy it?
I got this trainer that I've been working with this year, and he gives you some some supplements to buy. But
it's funny.
don't take nutrition advice.
No, it's funny.
I'm a work in progress.
Because I made I posted a clip of my last podcast, and if you read the caption, which I'm sure you didn't, I was quoting someone else on TikTok who'd said, put a microphone in somebody and a camera angle like this, and you don't look into the camera, you look next to the camera, and it's like you'll buy anything that guy's selling because he must be important because he's on a podcast, right?
Well, I'm not going to plug anything because I'm,
Why? You got somewhere else to go? How are we doing on time? Well,
no, I'm not going to. I don't know because I don't even know the name of the product.
I bet you do. You're just being.
Okay, Google. I'll send it to you later.
It doesn't.
You can add it in post.
Sure. So we'll come back for the second interview because some people will dying to know.